All right. I am hoping that this is getting to you guys. This is Honors Geometry. I have, if you guys can hear me, can somebody just text or chat back that you can hear me? I see that it says 4 of you are watching. I know that, 6, yay! 6 of you. Oh, thank you, Reagan, Emma. I appreciate that. I had Honors Algebra 2 before this, and apparently I've not mastered the art of the microphone. So, for whatever reason, I have one of my mics working, but the other one, when I switch back and forth between what I want to show you, if I'm not on the hover cam, for some reason the other mic isn't working. So if for some reason you don't hear anything, keep in mind that it's not that you lost connection. I think I'm not sure how to get the computer's mic all of a sudden to work. When we practiced the other day, everything worked great. Today, for whatever reason, I can't get the second microphone to work. This is way out of my comfort zone. Thankfully, you guys, the 4 of you who are now watching live, I've had a little bit of practice, so at least it won't be as bad as the first time around. So I'm trying to check right now for you guys what the lag is. Typically, there's supposed to be a 20-second lag time, so I'll always here be about 20 seconds. Oh, it's 13 seconds now, I just realized. So there's a 13-second lag from when I actually put the pen down on my paper to when you got to see it. Oh, thank you, McKenna. I do appreciate it. You guys are not going to get away from me making jokes with you, that's for sure. So I appreciate it. The only good thing is I can make mistakes and nobody can really see what's going on behind the screen. So it's gonna sound like I am not talking for about 13 seconds because I do want to put up on the screen a Pages document that was given to you guys Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. All right. So what you saw again was just a reminder, because it's definitely something that I hope I don't have to say with an honors class, but we need to make sure that we keep this appropriate. I know that we all have lots of fun when we're in class, but what we have to remember is that this is definitely new for all of us, and we want to make sure that we're all comfortable with it. So don't forget. Oh, that's right. Today is St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. I just want to make sure that we are all aware that rules are the same as if this was our classroom. So everything is appropriate. And at least from what I understand, that, again, I know last class, the Honors Algebra 2, Ms. Jacinto was watching, Mrs. Bangle and Mrs. DeLees are fully aware of where we're at and what we're doing, and they'll be watching. And because everything is recorded and kept, please just remember to be smart when you do post questions. I know it's, at least for me, it's tough typing and talking at the same time. So just keep in mind that we need to be appropriate. Make sure that when you are asking, try to be specific with your questions. So what that may be is in the chat, you can ask questions, and it doesn't matter. Just make sure if you have a question, you ask. You can email me previously to our live streams. So before the live streams, you can email me so I can get an idea of what you want asked, what question it might be, and I can be prepared so that it's already written out on the paper and you don't have to watch me write it down. That'll save some time. If you do have a question during the live stream, you will have to type it in with the chat. So you can send pictures of problems so that I get a better idea, or at least, hush, sorry, they were quiet the whole first hour. You can send pictures of your problems or the E&C pages that I will have loaded, and that way I can address them the second day. So ideally what's going to happen is every day, sorry, day 1, we are going to talk notes just like we would in class. Nothing is going to change. We are going to attempt to keep everything as traditional, as comfortable, and as what you're used to as possible. And what we're going to do is I will handwrite the same way that I do all the time. That way, truly, you guys don't have to worry about relearning anything or getting accustomed to different habits that I have. Then day 2, what will happen is we will go over any questions you have. That way, it doesn't feel like you're going to get overloaded every day. So you're not going to have new material every day. Day 1's going to be the notes and practice questions. Day 2, we will go over any questions that you have. I will write out in my over-the-top obnoxious way, write out steps so that you can follow along. And there will be E&C questions that you will practice. I've been told that I am capable of uploading PDFs of my work, so that, and I have an app now on my phone that should do that. I forgot to tell the Algebra 2 class, but that should help too with especially the E&C pages. But make sure that you are specific now, and you're going to have to be prepared. So all of a sudden I wanted to sing the Lion King song. Be prepared. You're not going to get a ton of stuff from everyone, but what's going to happen is if you don't budget your time and truly try to play this like you are in school, you're going to miss out on, I don't want to say a lot of material, but just the structure. And I know that with all of us at different ages, that's going to be very important right now, is trying to keep ourselves organized, trying to structure our days. Think about it the day before so that when you are in that day, you are ready. I practiced doing this all last night so that I at least was able to make sure that I could pull things up accordingly. All right, so the other thing that I want to show you before we get started is, you know the rules, you know how I'm going to run the day. There is going to be a moment here where, again, I'm going to go to apparently dead air, but I am going to show you on the screen the program that I'm hoping to use. And it's called Knowre. And I am almost certain that you will not need to worry about any assignments, so to speak. You are loaded as a geometry class. The classes don't necessarily match our chapter for our book. So for instance, the chapter that you're in your book for the E&C pages is chapter 8. Some of the stuff that I'm giving you says chapter 7. In the Knowre account, it says chapter 8. So I will always load it with the fact that we're talking about similar polygons. So right now you were given a login to Knowre, and it kind of looks like some cartoony, some stuff there, but you're going to see a lot of different classes, and hopefully yours specifically comes up geometry. And I know that there's an assignments tab and a geometry tab. It just might say assignments. I'm not sure. What I'm looking at is a little bit different than yours. I have grades 1 through Algebra 2. Don't worry, I think, about assignments at this point. I do believe that you will go in and simply click on the lesson that I tell you to do. So you're going to see that it will, the one I'm going to click on is lesson 8.3. So I'm going to click over. All right. So we were looking at the screen that said lesson 8.3. And when I click on that, you're going to see some tabs off to the left. And there's some videos that you can watch. There's some introductory stuff. You'll obviously see everything has a cartoon. But then when you click on the first question, you're going to see somebody pop out on the side, and it's going to ask for every question, do you need help? So I'm going to click over real quick so you Okay, so everything that you're looking at with Knowre, that is going to be how we're going to run practice questions. I like that it's a little bit nicer, or at least, I don't know, a little more comfortable than Khan. Khan Academy is obviously still someplace that you can go to get help. But for right now, the note, quiet. I'm sorry. The Knowre account. Hey. I think I handled that quite well. Sorry. They were very quiet for the first hour. Sorry about that, guys. The Knowre account is at least a little bit more comfortable, a little less over the top like Khan. But your Knowre assignments, the deadline for any of those will be after spring break. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't be doing them. What that means is when I put them in the computer, I can't change the deadline for what we're going to be doing in this chapter. So if I told everybody complete the assignment by Friday, and then I realize we still have stuff that we need to do, and you still have questions, my concern would be that you're stuck with getting that done by the original deadline. So it is after spring break, but in Google Classroom, I will write all the requirements, all the targeted deadlines. And that way we can kind of try to keep ourselves organized and structured. So whatever is the deadline in the computer program, that's fine, that's great. But what we're looking at is really just trying to stay as structured as possible. This is something that I mean absolutely no disrespect. I know how I was when I was younger. I also know how I am right now. And if there wasn't something that keeps me structured, that it would be very easy to just say, oh, I'll do it later. And then later happens and you're not done and you're not ready and you're not caught up to where you should be. So I do suggest, if I'm able to step out of my comfort zone to try to live stream and not get my irritated self when it comes to things that don't work, like the second microphone, or things that go wrong like the dogs barking, and I can stay positive and focused, we can at least structure ourselves every day to block off time. You are supposed to be in a building, so this should not be a big deal to kind of block off time for each of your classes. So, so far so good. Are there any questions that any of you that are watching have right now that I haven't talked about that you can think of that you're concerned with? Again, I know that I have a few of you watching right now and a few of you that have answered me, but I just want to make sure if you have any questions you can ask. All right, so what we're going to do then is specifically today, the first thing that I want us to at least try to tackle is the My GeoBook pages that I did give you the packet for on Thursday. It was either Wednesday or Thursday, and I had told you to just do the first page with all the angles. Emma, thank you. It is not off topic. I know that I actually had to US mail tests back to people so that they can do the corrections and have the same opportunity as the rest of you guys did. You absolutely can take pictures of your test corrections. Know that if you have them done, you can go ahead and take pictures of them and email them to me today. However, if you are not done with them, I'd like all of you to consider that you have an opportunity now. I am not saying you have extra time because you are still doing your lessons for all of your classes, but you are at home, and I am hoping that you are staying at home and, you know, trying to stay safe and keeping those around you from getting anything. I know that Mrs. Reynolds posted something from the gentleman who spoke at our assembly, a video, and I thought that was very profound, but you absolutely have now the time to get caught up on our work. So if you have your test corrections, you absolutely can email them to me today. If you don't have them today, you still have obviously a ton of time to do so. So I know I mailed, like I said, a couple back so that they do have them. Thank you. That was a very good question. So the My Geo book pages, and I am going to put the picture up very quickly. Just so that you know what I'm referencing. And I do want to know, does anybody have any questions from that? The first page is the one that I did ask for you to try to take care of. I do suggest that the second page we'll kind of work on today a little bit, but the 8.1 and 8.3, the 8.1 we can definitely do at this point. The 8.3 I'm looking at, we'll probably want to talk a little bit more today to make sure that you're comfortable with that. So specifically today, are there any questions on the first and third page? I'm gaining viewers. McKenna probably already left me. She made sure she was talking to me. You know I love you, McKenna. All right, I don't see if there's any questions now. If you don't have any questions right now, because you're like, I didn't look at this, I'm not sure where it's at, just know that you absolutely can email me a specific question. What I am going to take a look at are two problems that are similar to what I'm looking at. Oh, thanks. McKenna's still around. That's okay. You can tell everybody that you had an exhilarating morning listening to math. I will say I do believe this is better than us just hand doing everything without knowing why it's being done. Two of the questions, and I'm going to draw them out very quickly, look similar to these two. And the idea is for us to figure out what the angle measures are. Now, obviously, in one of them, they have tick marks, and in the other one, they don't. And the idea is then, how do we figure out what the missing measures are? So I just want to Oh, Brooke's there. See, I saw somebody jump in. I had the PDF up so I could try to remember what the questions were. So on the paper, they want us to figure out how to match those angles, and the same thing over here. And one makes it easy because we have tick marks. The other one, I will say the worksheet doesn't really give us much to go on. And in my opinion, this first example, nobody, especially in the honors class, truly, should have any issues with doing our first example because the tick marks tell us to match everything up. So we have to remember that congruent angles are always with similar triangles. So if I have congruent angles and they're all congruent, are corresponding, it will give us similar triangles. And what we're looking at is this idea that the tick mark should tell us which ones are corresponding. Our matching game isn't that big of a deal. The other thing that we have to consider is what kind of triangle this is, because we have angles that are the same. So our two congruent angles in both of these make these triangles isosceles. And with isosceles means that our sides are congruent. So I should be able to very quickly figure out that all of these are 45 degrees. And that isn't a big deal. So hopefully if you're looking at that particular problem on that worksheet, that's fine. So the point is that one should be easy. The issue is then we get to the example that looks like a bow tie, and I drew it upside or top to bottom here instead of side to side. There's no way to tell in this picture which angle should be where. So I would always say, as a rule of thumb, if you're unsure, remember that typically what we're used to seeing are those sides parallel. So it's not in the problem, but typically you will be told parallel sides with a picture like this. So I am putting in our parallel sides. What's good about that is we should be able to remember that our vertical angles will always be congruent. And then what we can remember is these Z shapes that should appear when we have parallel lines. These Z shapes do allow us the opportunity to have alternate interior angles. So even if the parallel lines are not there, we should be able to take a look at the Z shape for the alternate interior angles. And then don't forget, triangles add up to 180 degrees, and that should make that last set easy to find, where we already have 100 degrees in both, and then the last angle when we subtract would be our 80 degrees. So I do believe with the honors, with you guys in the honors class, that first page should not have been a major issue because of the way it was set up. But again, if you have any questions on that, please make sure you are specific in the email beforehand, and then I can go ahead and answer them and be prepared to answer them on tomorrow's live stream. As I'm looking at the 8-1, again, I'm going to go quiet here for about 13 seconds. As I'm looking at the 8-1 homework, I wasn't sure if there was any questions that you had concerning any of those problems. I know that there's talk at the top about the number line in 13 through 16, where you actually have to determine the length of AB and the length of CD. We have problems in the middle where it solves proportions, and then of course we have the ever dreaded word problems at the bottom. So I want to make sure if there's any questions that you do ask now. Otherwise, we're going to push forward a little bit. That way you'll understand what the notes are that you're looking at tonight, and then you can kind of get used to what some of the homework is going to look like. And again, I say homework, it is not going to be the over-the-top stuff. Everybody's got a lot that they're juggling at this point, so I want to make sure that you are comfortable and confident with what you're doing, not just feeling overwhelmed with what's going on. So it looks like you guys are all okay. I don't see any feedback. All right. So if we're going to talk about similar polygons, what I'd like for us to remember is, in order for them to be similar, we need to have all of our corresponding angles congruent, and we need all corresponding sides in proportion. Again, in proportion is just a really fancy way to say the same reduced ratio. Okay, I see it, Sarah. We'll go back. Number 13. Got it. All right, so Sarah had a question. I'm good with that. We've got practice B, 8-1, and it does give us the number line at the top. And we have 0 where A is, and then we have 1, 2 where B has a point. And it does want us in number 13 to talk about AB to CD. So don't forget that those are lengths that they're talking about. And that means when I count the distance from A to B, I need to also make sure that I'm counting the distance from C to D. So from A to B, they're telling me is 1, 2 increments. So I'm going to write down 2 on top. And then from C to D, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the distance is 4. So remember, this means length of or distance between. So it's either length of or distance between is when we're talking about those segments without the bars on top. So the only thing then that I need to make sure is it does say use the number line to find the ratio. So because it wants ratio, we have to make sure we reduce. So make sure that your final answer, when you're all done, you will write 1/2 as your final answer. Because again, we have to reduce. Okay. So if you have other questions, I can go back and forth. It's not a big deal. Again, there is a lag in time, so I'm not sure what we're looking at and what we're not. We are going to keep coming back to this packet. Again, obviously, because things have changed, a little bit. You still have a paper copy of stuff that you should be practicing, but I want to make sure that we stay, again, on track with where we're supposed to be. So looking back at our similar polygons, one of the things that we did briefly talk about on Thursday is when we're looking at our pictures. So if you are told, you're going to see it and I'll explain it before we sign off for the day. If you're told to list all pairs of corresponding angles, if you're told to write a proportion for corresponding sides, or this could be write a proportionality statement. There's two ways that this can happen. The first way is they can simply tell you triangle LMN is similar to triangle XYZ. They do not have to tell you what the picture is. They don't have to show you any numbers. They are already telling you that these guys are similar. So the first thing for us to pay attention to is that when we want our corresponding congruent angles, we're going to match them just like we did in our congruent triangle chapter. We're going to take the first letter and we are going to match it with the second letter. Or I should say the first letter in the second triangle. The second letter M would match with the second letter from the second triangle, and then N matches with Z. Again, keeping them in order. And at this point, we're going to assume that because there's no picture in front of us, all the angles can be named with one letter. When we name our corresponding sides, we have to remember that they're in proportion. They are not congruent. The similar symbol here tells me that they're not going to be the same. So when we write them in proportion, we're going to take the first two letters and we write them as a ratio because something's going to be bigger than something else, whether it's twice as big, 3 times as big, half as big. But again, there's going to be this relationship or the comparison, and that's what we have to remember about ratios. Those are comparisons. So LM would go with the first two letters XY. MN would go with the next two letters YZ. And then however this triangle you have envisioned has closed itself off, I always say L and N, the first and the last, first and last. That way we know the triangle has closed off. And what we're looking at again is our proportionality statement, or our sides in proportion. The only other thing that I want to keep in mind here is notice how this triangle was first and this triangle was second. I've kept all of the angles first and all of the sides on top. That way at least there's organization again to what we're talking about, and that's truly how most everything's going to be listed when we do this. Now, the other way that this same question can be asked is going in the opposite direction. It could give us a picture, and then we have to decide, are they similar or are they not? And again, when we talk about determine, that means we don't know that it is yet. So the word determine means maybe it is, maybe it's not. And then what we're looking at is another thing that comes up is the if so that gives us a hint that maybe they weren't, so it gives us an out. You can say, no, they're not similar. So if so, they're going to want us to write a similarity statement. Now, a similarity statement is what we talked about on Thursday last week, where you write out this part. So in number 1, they gave us the similarity statement and made us do all of this. In this example over here, number 2, they're asking for it. So we have to make sure that we look at our tick marks. Now, scale factor is something that, again, we kind of briefly mentioned. And we're going to look at what that is here again as well. So I'm going to stick with triangles. You're going to have a couple examples that may not be triangles, but nothing changes. Again, it's just 4 sides instead of 3. So we're going to look at these two. In example A, we'll call this H, J, K, T, S, and R. And for you guys, we're going to stop with those tick marks. And we're going to look at it this way. So you're going to see that in the notes I load, you are going to have examples that are very similar to this, so I do suggest you look at my my notes. Just right now I decided to give you a different glimpse of something so that you can kind of see what we're talking about. So I'm looking at this and I want to pay very close attention to where my tick marks are. And if I'm not paying attention to where my tick marks are, I very quickly see, okay, well, 10 and 5, that's 2 to 1. I see 3 and 6.5, that's a 2 to 1. And I see 12 and 6, and that's a 2 to 1. Now, if there wasn't so much lag time, I'd actually ask, and I could ask this in the future for those of you that are there to answer me in the chat. Problem is 10 is between these two tick marks. If these were going to match, the first thing that I want to do before I do anything with my sides is always first check if all corresponding angles are congruent. Always. If the angles don't match, you don't have to go any further. You can say, no, they're not similar because corresponding angles are not congruent. Right now, I'm going to tell you that you can see H and T are congruent. H is congruent to angle T. That's given. J is congruent to S. Oops. That's given. And here would be, of course, thank you, Paxton, I suppose. At this point, I'm looking at K and R don't have, that was actually kind of funny. I needed that, Paxton. Thank you. We'll keep those limited, though, for all the administrators checking in. Problem is K and R don't have any tick marks. Does anybody know, and I am going to ask, hopefully somebody can answer, anybody know what theorem allows K and R to still be congruent even though there's no tick marks? I'll drink coffee while I wait. Oh, thank you, Landon. You're absolutely correct. So angle K and angle R are congruent because there is that third angle theorem. And we need to make sure that we don't forget that all of that still applies. So we can say absolutely that so far we can keep going because all corresponding angles are congruent. Now here's the catch. I will say that if you are asked, and I am still making sure that I'm going to teach to what you guys need to know for whatever you are held accountable for at the state level. For me, I still would expect if I ask you to explain that you are able to still write out your thoughts appropriately, and we will figure out how that works and how we'll do that in the future. Right now is just understand what we're talking about. But all of this works. The trick is I need to pay attention. Do my sides match the way they should? So when I look where 10 is, I'm sure all of you have already figured this out. The sides don't match. 10 is between the 2 and the double and the single tick mark. The double and the single tick mark over here holds 6.5. So when I check if sides are proportional, I would match 10 to 6.5. I would check if it's the same as 13 to 5, and I would check if it's the same as 12 to 6. And at this point, I am certain that we have all figured out that they're not in proportion. So, no, they're not. And I think that's because we can tell they're not all equal to 2 to 1. So these are not similar. And we can say because sides not in proportion. And we don't have to worry about a scale factor because they're not similar. So there is no scale factor. A scale factor will only happen if they are. So if that's something you're also concerned with, a scale factor can only happen only if similar. So keep that in mind. All right. One last problem and then we're done for the day, and I'll show you because we've got about 2 minutes left technically in a 50-minute class. We won't always go a whole 50 minutes, but I just want to make sure when you're looking at your notes today, you're not overwhelmed. So if we are looking at things that are going to be similar. So again, we want to determine if similar. We want to, if so, we want a similarity statement. And scale factor. And again, I'll look at a triangle, but I'm going to hide a triangle in a triangle. And let's go ahead and name this guy A, B, C, D, E. And We are going to say that these are parallel, and as I'm writing, if anybody knows already how some of the angles are going to be congruent, go ahead and type it in. Hopefully Paxton's back from the restroom. But if you already know how some of these angles are going to work, go ahead and type that in and we'll take a look to see if you're right. There's a couple ways, just to be clear. Oh, yay! Landon. And good job, Lily. Corresponding angles are congruent. Yep, that's correct. There is another one that I'm certain we may be forgetting. And this is where we don't see it as clearly. So as I write, I agree Landon and Lily do have our corresponding angles accounted for because of our parallel lines. So we do have, and I'm going to point those guys out here. If anybody else sees how to get the other one, no takers? All right, so I'll point it out. Sometimes it's going to help if you separate your triangles. So, oh, Andrea, that's a good idea. I like same side interior. Because we could have these guys that will, so EBC right here and right here, depending upon how we're looking at this, that can come into play. It will not help. And here's what to remember, and Andrea, I'm actually glad you said that because we talked a lot about trapezoids in the past, so those same side angles, we concentrated a lot. Remember, with similar figures, we need everything to be congruent. So we don't want anything that's going to end up being supplementary. Now, it could help us find angle measures that would eventually give us congruence, but it's that idea that the same side, our supplementary, isn't going to help us with our similar requirements. So I like that you guys are typing in over here because honestly, Andrea, had you not typed that, I wouldn't have thought to say it. And that is, again, something that not being face-to-face in the classroom, we don't get as readily. If you guys are willing to type that in, that helps me tremendously feel a little bit more confident about what we're doing here. So I keep encouraging us to answer. Please remember there's lag time. So it might be that I'm not answering and you see something at a different time. I don't know how that works because I'm not watching this right now. I am going to separate the triangles because I think that's going to help. And what we see is there's this little one on top. So our little one on top is called A, B, E. And our little one on top, well, we know Andy's a genius. McKenna, I tell you, you are her biggest fan. And we've got this guy that we already have a tick mark for. This one we already have a tick mark for. We have 4, 5, and 6. But as I draw the other triangle, I'm curious if you can actually tell me, anybody, just type in a number. If I'm looking at ACD as the triangle, what is the length of AC and AD? Anybody know what AC's length is actually going to be as I put in the tick marks? Perfect. Nice. Thanks, guys. That's really exciting. Hi, Natalie. I haven't seen your name yet, but thanks. That's awesome. But you are right. We're looking at 12 and we're looking at 15. So the reason I wanted to do the problem this way, because it is different than what you're going to see in a minute. We don't pay very close attention a lot of times that there's this little triangle here and there's actually a big triangle that's loaded here. And we see 4 to 8 and we think 1 to 2, 5 to 10, 1 to 2. And then all of a sudden we look at this one and go, oh, it's got to be 1 to 2. And people will put 12 when they're actually wanting to fill in this number. And when we're asking which of these there are, we put the wrong answer because we're so used to seeing a 1 to 2, a 1 to 2. So what we have to be careful of is making sure we separate. So those numbers are going to help us. So nobody knows how to find what angle A is, and I will tell you it is not the third angle theorem. I get that it works here when we separate the triangles, but those really aren't separate. They're all part of one picture. So we have to figure out if we can see they're going to be the same, and they're the same measure, but they appear in two different figures at the same time. What do we call that reason why angle A can be congruent to angle A? Okay, now the triangles definitely are proportional 3 to 1. And you could say 1 to 3. There isn't a real designated way at this point for us to decide. And you are correct. Because the sides are proportional by 3 to 1, we are going to talk about how this is that they're going to be similar. I still haven't given a good reason, though, why angle A is congruent to angle A. Anybody know that one? Excellent. You are correct. We do have that it is reflexive. So when I look up here in this one, the reason it's congruent to itself is because of the reflexive property. Again, if I am asking for us to give our reason, we have to be able to support it from the original diagram, not how we separated it. So now we're able to determine if. So we have our reasons, and we can now say angle A is congruent to angle A, and that is our reflexive property. We can say angle ABE is congruent to angle C. Those are corresponding angles. We can say angle AEB is congruent to angle D, again, corresponding angles. Notice I made sure I named them with 3 letters because in the original problem, it isn't sitting by itself. There is 1, 2, 3, that straight angle at that vertex. So we do have it checked off that all corresponding angles are congruent. So yay, that's the first thing that we're able to determine. So that's the first thing off our checklist. Since all the angles are congruent, we have to move on to the sides. Now, I know, Natalie, you said that they were proportional 3 to 1, and I absolutely agree. The way I've ordered it, and because there isn't anything to tell me what order to put them in, I'm looking at this as small is first, big is second, so that is the way I'm choosing to write this. There is no right or wrong at this point. When they tell us what order to compare them, then we have to be careful. So because I'm going to stick with small to big as essentially our verbal model to kind of work with, I'm going to look at AB corresponds with AC, and AE corresponds with AD, and BE corresponds with CD. And again, I made sure that the order of the tick marks is how I also ordered my letters. And when I do plug all the actual numbers in, 4 to 12, 5 to 15, 6 to 18, they all reduce 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So we have that 3 to 1 or the 1/3. Which one's right? They're both right. We just haven't been told yet what order to put them in. So we can say there's a 1 to 3 relationship or there's a 3 to 1 relationship. Either way, we have now stated that all sides are in proportion. So our sides are proportional. And with that being said, we can now answer the question. The question initially was, determine if they're similar. If so, write the similarity statement. So I can finish this with A, B, E is similar to A, C, D. And that's our similarity statement. And it does ask for us to list the scale factor. So our scale factor is the ratio that it reduced to. Now, again, I list it as 1 to 3. We could have listed it as 3 to 1 for right now, because again, we're not told which order do they want the triangles. They're just asking us, do we recognize it? I know that to me even feels at this point a little uncomfortable. Like, how do I know? We don't. We can just say that for right now, because we're not told the order of the triangles, either one will work. So you're going to be given notes that are very similar, not to use the word too much today, to what we just did in class. You are at no means to copy everything. You do not need to copy all of it down. It is entirely up to you how you want to address that. And make sure that you check out the practice problems. Now, I did load, or I should say I will load, because I haven't done that yet. I can't even imagine right now if my girls knew that Emma was actually on this at some point. They probably would have squealed and been in here very happy, thinking that they might have been able to see all of you guys. They saw Cameron at Aldi's and was tickled to, that they even got to see somebody that they knew from class. But here is what I'm going to load for you guys. You will see that there's a study guide. It is not required. Maybe you can't see it. Oh, there it is. It is not required. It is something that you should pretend is required so that you stay on track. But you're going to see that there's the notes at the top. And that there's these practice problems that we just did. And then there's actually going to be a couple more where you're going to actually apply how to write your proportions. And there's notes here for that, because I do believe you are capable of doing that. And then, to make us very comfortable and not overwhelmed, everything is worked out with notes so that you understand why everything is being done. So you will find every one of these is written out and ready for you to kind of grade yourself. Again, I will post everything to Google Classroom. I will put all of the directions in Google Classroom. I will tell you what you need to worry about, all in Google Classroom. And for right now, what you are going to do is you are going to concentrate on another class. Make sure that you get your schedule ready. I've got to go find if they've actually not either played on their devices too much because they don't like the fact that I've told them they have to stay quiet. But I'm going to go check on them. I will check my email regularly now because my office hours did just start. So I will be on email from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, I start my geometry class. And then I will continue to watch and look at my email throughout the afternoon and the evening. So again, please check Google Classroom for your information. And I will get that posted within the next hour or so. So everybody have a great day. I will be back again tomorrow, hopefully with more normal class stuff, not any more of the what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And thank you, McKenna. Definitely this is out of my comfort zone, but it makes it a little bit easier than just typing everything in. I do want your feedback. If there's something that I can do differently, let me know, because again, I don't see what you're seeing. So thanks, guys. Have a great night or a great day.